Hi there. Hi, everyone.
Hey.
My name is Dennis,
Thank
or
you.
Den for friends. That's good. I will be sharing my screen in a second now.
Do set that up, and I will let you take it away, and we'll see you on the other side.
There we go.
Okay.
There we go. Hi, everyone. My name is Dennis. I'm one of the founders and CEO of Buffel, and we are an agile validation agency. Now, sounds super buzzwordy, and it is, of course, it's marketing. I've got 20 to 25 minutes, so let's go. I'm going to explain a little bit what Buffel is to get a little bit of context, because I'm not going to dive too deep into what UX and UI is, because you all know that. But you need to know a bit what the context of Buffel is to understand why I'm going to talk about do not dive too deep into mockups yet. And then I'm, of course, going to explain a little bit why it's dangerous to dive too deep into mockups too early on in your innovation process. And it's going to be based on use cases, so that's always fun. Now, to give you a broad idea of how Buffel came to be, it is that innovation fails in 75 to 80% of the time. It is in Belgium, that's the case. And that's a problem. If you have an idea, we work a lot with corporates. And corporates have about 100 innovation projects running in parallel, and every project is costing them roughly about 1 million euros. So if 75% of that fails, you might get an idea of how big of a problem it is. Now, that doesn't mean that UX is the thing that always makes sure it fails. Definitely not. It's along the way. And it's mostly based on decision making. Now, to get an idea of how validation or innovation works, roughly it's this. You have a start of an innovation project or start of a new design project, and you have all the way at the end, you have the product market fit. That means you've put something into the market and it's the ideal product for the market. Between that, you have a theoretical line, and every decision that you take along the way should be on that line. Why that line? Because it means that you have taken every decision along the way, be it whether you're going to make an app, or you're going to create a new website, or you're going to choose a color red for the new product, or you're going to make sure that it's a peer-to-peer lending instead of buying or renting. That's all super important, the decision making in that. And currently, it's only at the end of the process that you have your moment of truth. You put it into the market, you have made a lot of decisions, and then you enter the market and you feel like it's selling or it's not selling. In the end, what we see is that a lot of decisions are being made, but not based on data, not based on what your end user is expecting you to deliver. And that is why it goes awry. If you have your first moment of truth at the end when it's in the market, you're way too late. And I'm going to circle back to that later. I'm going to skip this one. So I've mentioned the 75 million per company that's being thrown out of windows, because it's only 25% that actually survives after 1 year in the market. Doesn't mean that it's cashing in. Doesn't mean it's a cash cow or that it's core product. It just means that it survives, that it sells. And as Buffel, it's our mission to reverse this number. Now, how do we do that? We turn this into this. We believe that validation is a core asset of innovation. And why? Because you need to make a decision based on data, not just gut feeling. And that's why we started thinking, well, if we want to make decisions based on data, we have to be able to gather data, we have to be able to structure it, and we have to be able to decide in a very structured manner what is needed to be decided in every phase of the innovation process. Very theoretical. How do we make this work? Well, we have a dashboard just for clients that can pose questions on, that they can release surveys, that can do UX UI tests. And then you have a community, our own community, that is answering those questions in trade for some rewards, of course. It means that we can get data very quickly. In a few hours, we have your data set of 300 completes. So that's allows for agile decision making, and Glenn will move on to that later, to be able to be implemented into design sprints. It allows for quick decision making based on what you already have, and to validate your assumptions before you start designing. I'm going to skip this one because it's about our respondents and why they signed up to us. And this is our panel. It's not really relevant, but we have our own panel and we can scale it outside of Belgium. That's the most important thing you should know. Now, how do we scale this? Is because innovation is always the same thing. It's always problem, solution, go to market. And ideally, you validate along the way. Go to market, UX, UI design, branding, that's all in the go to market phase. Solution, UX, UI mockupping about your concept is in the middle. Now, you see two Marios running. To explain a bit how we see agile validation, you have to understand that the gray Mario, he just is the classic way of validating. And he runs through the process and he fails at the end. And what we see with the green Mario is that, and the animation is a bit botched, but what you see is that he jumps from phase to phase and he validates along the way. That means if you have identified a problem in a market in a certain context, then you can throw any solution to there and see if it works or not. See if there is an interest to be measured, yes or no. If there isn't, then you can just get back to the problem phase because you have a save point, just like in Super Mario. You can, if you fail later in the level, you can get back to 50% of the level right in the middle. And that's exactly how innovation works or should work. You should validate your assumptions along the way, and you should know what to validate. And that's where our methodology comes in. So, and here is the link to mockupping and UX UI design. In the solution phase, I'm not going to go through everything, but in the solution phase, people tend to start mockupping directly to explain what their concept is, to visualize it, and to depict it in a way that everyone can understand. And visuals are very strong here. Now, if you start doing that too early without really knowing what the problem is, or really knowing what your ideal buyer persona is, or really understanding what values are in the concept, you might run yourself stuck in the street you do not want to end up in. And that is exactly what I want to talk about. What we see with clients is that they quickly and immediately start creating images or start creating videos or start visually supporting their idea. And because it's more tangible, of course, and that's a very clear way of communicating with someone, explaining a product or a new concept or an idea. The thing is that we as humans, when something is tangible, it becomes harder and harder to let go of it. And that's why killing your babies or your darlings becomes much harder the more it is tangible. And that's why we, as Buffalo, we see it a lot with clients. We need to put in a lot of effort when a client comes to us and says, I have this idea, it looks like this. Can you validate the brand image? Can you validate this advertising or this landing page that we want to do to sell it? And what we do is we challenge the idea of the product first. And we want to see if there is any need for that product and if it solves a real pain or not. Now, let's look at some real life cases because there is going to be Q&A after, and I want to make sure that I have enough time to answer all of your questions. So I'm going to go through 3 cases that will explain a bit better how we have encountered some problems there. And the first one is about Couple Ice Cream. It's a startup. Well, it was from the Australian ice cream, the fresh ice cream maker with parlors everywhere in every city. And they came to us with a new idea. So they wanted to create an ice cream maker for at home that churns fresh ice cream on the spot at your kitchen counter all year long, and high quality ice cream, fresh ice cream that you can that can compete with any first class artisanal parlor. Sounds like an investment pitch, but it's not. They came to us with the idea, but also mockups already. You see here the product images that they already had. And they had some designs for the ice cream maker, also the cups and the tastes that were already there. They already had mockups for the website where they were going to sell this shit on, and also pricing options. So they already had an idea of everything. And the only thing that we needed to do is validate whether or not there was conversion on those pages. Now, we went through the process with them, and you see the process below, problem, solution, go to market. And it deemed upon us that they actually didn't validate the problem phase. They had no idea who was their niche target audience and what their expectations were from this kind of product and whether or not there is any interest in it. So the issue was that their early adopters, their ice cream lovers, didn't respond at all to the value of instant ice cream maker. The speed there was totally not relevant. They wanted to take time to create ice cream. And the ones that really loved ice cream, they already had an ice cream maker at home, but it took some days to do it. And so their niche audience of really ice cream lovers was not the big user group that they needed to target, actually. The biggest value of this product is that you do not have to keep ice cream in the freezer anymore. So it didn't clutter up your freezer. And those cups that you see is just filled with a liquid that gets frozen by the spoon that you see. And the spoon is super cold. And it creates ice cream from that cup. And that was the real value there, because people that occasionally eat ice cream, they keep a cup of ice cream, like 1 liter, in their freezer for a few years. It gets frozen over already. And then you have the feeling, oh, I want to eat an ice cream. But it's just not edible anymore because you're just eating ice crystals. And that was the real value there. So what we did is we moved them from the go-to-market phase all the way back to the value proposition. And really thinking about that value made them create a better pricing and a better landing page. So that's why don't move too fast in creating landing pages if you're not really sure about what you're actually selling and what the real value is that you need to get in your website to really convert people. Second one is Hapkin, we did for Alkenmaat. And they want to rebrand an iconic beer, actually, a craft beer, and launch a new IPA beer under the flag of Hapkin. So they had 4 bottle designs and 4 can designs. So what we needed to do with them is really validate which branding worked better for the brand of Hapkin, which design of the bottle. And when we started challenging them, there was no clear idea of user needs or expectations. They had no idea what expectations were of IPA drinkers. And they have no idea what IPA was associated with. So we did that first, and then we moved into discovery phase because they had really no idea. So we exploratively went for people that drink IPA on the regular. And then we asked them, why do you drink this beer? And even though they drank a lot of those beers, they really didn't order it in a pub when they were presented with it. Why? Because it's not that top of mind. So they really had to rebrand the IPA, and the IPA as such was not that important. The fact that it was Belgian and the fact that it was fruity was there. That was the new and the unfair advantage that they had. So we moved the branding towards the locally brewed and very fruity, and that seemed to convert better. So what they did was they created a lot of designs first, but they had no idea who their drinkers were. And so we moved them also back to the problem phase and then the value phase. And then Burger King was our most recent case that we did. And they launched a vegetarian burger and was with a gluten-free bun. And they realized that it was needed to replace the salads as a sole offering for vegetarians in their restaurants. So what did I create? Already product shots, advertising mockups, brand strategy, they're all ready. And then because those ad mockups were already designed and very tangible, there was quite a big struggle to refocus the strategy for the brand and for their advertising on what vegetarians really valued in a meat replacement offering. And the concept was so tangible, it was hard to iterate on the brand and the ad strategy. So we really had to, I think we had 3 validations run before we even could convince the marketing team that maybe the ad strategy that they had in mind was not the correct one, just because it was so tangible and because they had an idea before they started validating it. Now, there was the last case, so we moved them from really a concept phase still. They thought they were in the go-to-market phase, but they're really still in concept phase, and we moved them back to the problem phase as well. Now, what I want you to remember is that always question yourself, or your client for that matter, in what phase you are in the innovation process, because it's going to help you ask the right questions to them and to start designing based on what you already know, based on validated assumptions. And it's actually your job as an agency, if you're an agency, your job as a freelancer, to question your client, because often the client doesn't know where they are in this process. And UX is a very powerful tool. It really helps to make things tangible, but realize that when you're too soon and you start creating the value or the image in their mind, it's harder for them to let go. And it's your job to convince them to let go if it doesn't convert, if it doesn't seem to be the right product or right idea. And I'm going to end here. Is it on the 25 mark? We'll see.
I think you're on the 15-minute mark.
Oh, sorry. Well, a lot of
You
room for
skipped any
questions.
slides. No worries, no worries. We can have a little chat. Yeah, so just a question to kick it off. I mean, I think for years and years for UX designers, it's almost been a luxury to get like a research or testing budget from clients.
Yes.
And so we kind of take what we can get, and we tend to kind of treat those results as gold. You know, like clients shouldn't question them. You know, feedback from the user is so incredibly important. We need to focus on that. And so we've never really allowed ourselves to question the kind of feedback that we get. But I do think we're maturing a little bit more as an industry, and clients are starting to open up a little bit more, and we are getting more opportunities to do this kind of research. Now I think is the time where we're becoming a little bit more critical as to, you know, the quality of the feedback that we're getting. And I think that we're finding, or at least I'm finding in my work, that sometimes it's very hard to get authentic insights about real human behavior. People lie, they do exaggerate about things that they think that they should be doing, or they hide things that they're ashamed of, or, you know, they say things that they think you want to hear. So do you have any sort of industry tips or tricks or techniques for how to control for that?
Well, if you're testing UX UI, you have a lot of great tools for that. Yeah? So if you really want to test user behavior, you have like a usability or something, or a UX probe that really captures the real movement, eye movement or finger movement. That's what you really want to check. What we do is we have a useberry plugin for that. So it's a sketch or whatever you use, Adobe XD, that is being imported into that tool, and it tracks it for us in our tool. So it's a way to track real movement. Now, the second thing I want to touch upon is you have to ask the right questions. Asking them about future behavior, for example, never do it. And I have a whole course in how to ask the right questions. I'm not going to go too deep in that. But it really comes down to asking the right questions. And when people challenge us with quotes from Henry Ford, for example, that's as if I would have asked the people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Is a classic. I've written an article about it, by the way, because I got tired of explaining that. But quickly, I want to say it's, first of all, never stated that he really said it, never proven. But it just didn't ask the right questions. That's the only thing. You shouldn't ask for the solution to your audience, never. Not for your designs, not for product ideas. You have to ask the right questions about their problem, what they expect from the market, and then to answer your question about should we trust the data, you always should use your common sense. It's easy to gather data these days, very easy. If you start creating your own surveys on a type forum or whatever, you can send it around on Facebook and you will get answers. But it's the asking the questions and making sure you understand who is answering your questions. That is just common sense. You just have to keep your mind, because you will lose yourself to looking at data and to diving in too deep, and you start believing what you see, and it's very dangerous. So if you start on your own and you want to do this, make sure you understand who your audience is and why they would answer your questions and how fast they did it. And if your audience is diverse enough, don't ask questions to families, friends, colleagues. It's rather not the right industry. And that's a bit a problem, because I'm a product designer from education, and we tend to ask the people that we know that are in the same industry, and those are not the correct people actually to ask those questions to, because it's an old adage that designers design for other designers. They want to show off their arts and skills and crafts to other designers and make sure that they look like the better designer. But you're not competing against each other, you're competing against the market. And that's why you shouldn't ask your questions to peers, but to real audience, real customers.
Very true. Designers are very visual people, and I think that's a difficult leap for us. Is we are very attached to mockups or at least visual representations. So I think when I think of mockup, I think of like a sketch of what the app might look like, or a sketch of what a homepage might look like, that kind of thing. But to do this kind of pre-validation before mockups are there, like maybe this sounds like a weird question, but like, what are you using? If it's not a mock-up, like what else can you use to sort of explain the concept and get this feedback before
words
going into mockups? Like, what is that?
Words.
Words.
Explain it. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So just like an elevator pitch type thing.
Not even. It's too long. If you want to explain a value, because you're explaining a value proposition. If you have 4 product ideas and you're not going to create 4 mockups. That's too much work. Unless you get paid a lot by your client, of course, then by all means do. But if you are a bit on the let's save some materials type of thing in a crisis, that's always a good thing to do for a client. You want to start working on the thing that this is validated. There is a lot of magic in what we're offering here, and that's typically a value proposition. So what you do when you have 4 ideas, you create them comparable. So the quality of how you present it should be the same. If you create a mockup for one and the other one is just a sentence and the other one is you explaining it on video, the quality of how you present it is different. So you cannot compare it empirically. So what you have to do is you have to create the same quality. If you have one concept that you created a mockup for, you have to create them all. And you have to create 4 mockups to be able to compare it empirically. So what we do to explain a concept, it should always be the same structure. You always, in a value proposition, you always have the subject that faces a certain problem and that is presented with a value that solves that problem. And there are a lot of iterations on this and different modules to do this, but if you keep that structure, you will be able to transfer the idea to someone who's reading it. And if you cannot do that, your idea is too complex. And then I agree, then you should support it. But if you strip it from all the fancy things and you cannot get someone to understand that concept, it's just too complex for a common user. And then you have to take your lessons and go to, well, it's going to be hard as well to explain it in a marketing campaign or on a website. So make sure you can break it down to the bare essence and make people understand it in words. What I want to what you could take away from this is just make sure if you compare different concepts that you can compare them on the same quality. That's it. If you create a mockup for one, create a mockup for all. If you just want to create a sentence for all, do it for every concept that you do. But it's about the value before you start designing.
Yeah, no, that's a good thing, because I often hear sometimes in mock-up testing and things like that users often get distracted by colors or extra things that sort of like grab their attention and distract them, and it is difficult to keep them on topic of like, no, we're actually just, is this something you would buy or is this something that you would do? So I like the fact that it takes away all those distractions and just distills it down to a simple like, would this solve your problem? I just think from your experience, what kind of skills are involved in that? If I feel like you'd need a good amount of like either sales experience or even like copywriting or storytelling to be able to kind of paint that picture.
Yeah, so a value proposition has no sales component to it whatsoever. It shouldn't. Then you're entering a sales pitch, and that's not what you want to do. You want to explain a concept in their bare bones so people understand it. And then you ask the question, are you interested in this in any way? What would you think is the biggest flaw in this? What do you think that makes it fail or could make it fail in the market? Those questions you want to get the answers to. Why? Because you do not want them to rate the design on it. If you have an idea for an application, you have 4 designs, do you want them to rate the design or the fact that the product itself delivers a value? You want to validate the value for them, the idea that it solves a problem for them, not the design. If they are going to give comments and you have designed it completely, they're going to get distracted from the design and they go past the real bare and bones of your idea. And that's what you need to validate first, and then you start designing. Make sense?
I think so. Yeah. And actually, we just got a very similar question from someone in the audience. Marlies was asking kind of a similar thing. So the checkpoint after the solution phase is sort of typically showing a mock-up of the solution to the customer, and she was saying like, what format do you check the problem in? And it sounds like for the most part, it's just really just getting people on the phone and explaining it to them and asking them like, does this solve your problem? Would you buy this? Would you do this?
So if I understand the question right, your question is about how do you validate a problem, right? So, right, okay. So
Solution, I think.
It's always in 2 phases. You always have an exploratory phase and an evaluative phase. Exploratory does mean you want to get as much as information on the table as possible. What does that mean? Is I'm going to ask you an open question, like in a certain context, you are waiting for your train. Can you tell me the last time that happened? And what was your biggest frustration? It's very open. And you will talk about, well, the train was not on time, or I couldn't check the schedule, or train was on time, but I was too late and I missed it just by a minute, things like that. So that's very open. You get a lot of information on the table. And then it's your homework. So you do not have a solution in mind. It doesn't matter. You want to get to the bottom of the problem in a certain context. And then your next step, that's my cue, I think. That's my time, or not?
No, that's my doorbell. Don't worry about it. Sorry.
Okay. So when you have an explorative view of, in a certain context, there are a lot of problems happening. The quick method is to think, well, I'm going to pick the one that seems the biggest or that gets mentioned the most, and that is my biggest problem. But there's a flaw, because that's not true. Because you skip something called latent needs. Latent needs are things that I might think is the biggest problem, but it's not on my top of mind. So if you ask me the biggest problem in waiting for a train, I might say, because it happened to me last week, that I missed my train because I had no battery in my phone. I hate that. But it's not my biggest pain in taking the train. It's having, for example, no Wi-Fi on the train or no 3G connection, so I cannot really work on the train. But it didn't happen to me that often, or it didn't happen to me last week, so I didn't think of it. And to me, that's a latent need. And if you ask me in an array of 5 problems, and you put Wi-Fi problems or 3G problems on the right in there, I will score it as most important. So what you move from explorative to evaluative is you can just quickly list up all your problems that you think are in the market, that you see in the market, and you ask people to rank them. Like, what do you think for you is the biggest problem? That's the easy thing. What we do also is we measure them in importance and satisfaction. So when you have clusters in all the information is on the table, I'm going to cluster some things as that's a connection problem, that is a planning problem, that is a family problem. And I'm going to make sure I put them in a format that questions satisfaction and importance. It means how important, for example, take 3G connection. How important is it for you to have a stable 4G or internet connection on the train? Next question is satisfaction. How satisfied are you now with the solution that you have to have a stable connection on the train? That will give me an idea of if something is super important and they're not really happy about it, then that's an opportunity in the market. And that's how you measure different problems against each other. And then you can, of course, check whether or not different audiences score a certain problem statement, because you're talking about problem statements at that point, are valued higher or lower. And for example, people that take the train every day, they might not think that problem is super big. But people that often or somewhat once a week take the train, that problem might be bigger because they're not used to taking the train. And that one time they take the train, they think, well, I'm all set. But that internet connection, man, it's super annoying. So you can identify target audiences based on those questions. So I hope it was an answer. You validate problem statements, not with solutions in mind. Definitely not.
Yeah, and I love it because I think the trend that I'm noticing is that we're doing a lot more user testing, but it's much lighter. I think, in the past, 5 years ago, we would be lucky to get user testing, and that's after we already have like a full-fledged prototype, and by then we're just checking usability. Like I think a lot of designers were lucky to get that just 5 years ago. And what I'm noticing now is that it's being chopped up. It's a lot lighter. It's happening earlier in the process. It's happening during the problem phase, during the initial solution phase, pre-mockup, maybe solution phase, post-mockup, and then later with the prototype to check usability. And there's a lot more of these like user testing touch points along the way, which I really like. And I think that can be useful to designers who maybe aren't granted access to do research at those stages. I feel like a lot of agencies and designers run into that, where the client says, like, we're not doing research, we're not doing testing, we already know this, or we've done it already. But the lighter that we can make it, the easier it is for us to kind of, sneak it in or get it in, or even just do it on our own without them knowing, just to get the information for our own design process. So I love these kind of guerrilla, light testing tactics. They're good for us.
You make a good point for an agency. It's a way to speed up the decision-making process together with your client, because often, more than not, a decision involves a discussion, and you present 4 or 5 design ideas, and the client says, I choose A, you said, I would go for D because I'm the expert. And then you have a consensus decision often. You say, well, A and D, if we take this from A and that from D, we combine them, nobody's happy, but this is the way forward. Or you say, I'm the agency, I know better, I convince my client, and you have a very tough decision making because you have 4 or 5 meetings, and he will think about it, and he will come back to you, and he will give some ideas, and you feel that a lot of hours are put in there, and data eases it up. It's just you have 5 ideas, and you say, well, I think this, you think that, and 300 people that are your potential clients think this. What are we going to say now? Then the decision is made super easy. So it really solves that discussion topic. Really.
Indeed it does. Well, thank you so much for your talk. That's about time right now. And thanks for having a little chat with me afterwards and taking on some of the questions from the audience. Really appreciated having you here. We are going to open up a session for Q&A with Dennis. If anyone has any further topics that they want to discuss with him or questions that we didn't cover, please go visit him there. Otherwise, take a break, check out the networking or the other sessions, and we'll come back in about 15 minutes at 8 o'clock, and we will hear from Glenn. See you then.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.